2013 was the first year that I really started going to regional qualifiers for Yu-Gi-Oh! Before that, I had gone to a lot of local tournaments, of course, and I think I had gone to maybe 2 different regional qualifiers. I did terrible at them. I was really young at the time, and even in 2013, I was still relatively young. I was a senior in high school, and but I tried to get my invite, basically, and how I did that was with Final Countdown, which is hilarious to think about now, but eventually I got my invite. I went to the WCQ. I did terrible, but in 2014, which is the time that my channel first got a big boost in subscribers, but it was also the time that I picked up Spirits. Now, if you've been around for a while, you might know that Spirits are one of my all-time favorite strategies. I played it for almost 9 months straight, and it all started with this Yu-Gi-Oh! Day first place list or whatever. And Yu-Gi-Oh! Days back then, I think this was like one of the very first ones, if not the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Day. It had the Zane mat, but regardless, I took this weird build of Spirits to that event, quote unquote, and it was a lot of fun. Basically, the idea was you would use Tsukiyomi to target Maiden with Eyes of Blue. That would then special summon a Blue Eyes from your deck, and that strategy in and of itself is pretty terrible, or that I found throughout the tournament. Specifically, the Blue Eyes engine was really bricky, just didn't really accomplish anything. However, I found out that the spirit monsters, Aratama and Nikitama, were actually quite good. Back then, there weren't as many good rank 4 engines, and there really weren't that many good rank 4s. But I played that deck at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Day. I did get first, not that that really matters, but it sort of laid the groundwork for my first regional top, which is what I want to talk about in this video. So what happened in between that list and when we flip over to this list, which is actually the one that I topped the regional with, the big change here was that Legacy of the Valiant came out. And what that meant is that we had Silent Honor Arc and Evil Swarm Exciton Knight. Now, I don't have the exact date for when Legacy of the Valiant came out, but I do know that this regional was not very far after the set dropped. I know this because one of the big things that you need to realize about this deck list, besides the fact that there's a lot of things that are pretty weird that we'll talk about here, but one of the big things is that I was one of the few people that actually owned not only 2 copies of Silent Honor Arc, but 2 copies of Evil Swarm Exciton Knight. And I remember this very distinctly because in my last round against a player, basically the entire match, he complained that I had these cards. Now, I was not very wealthy at the time. I did not have a lot of money to invest in the game. I played basically with all low rarity stuff. And but I did get pretty lucky with some pulls from some local tournament winnings. I remember distinctly that I bought, or I won 1 box that had an Honor Arc and an Exciton Knight in it. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, I got another Honor Arc and another Exciton Knight in separate boxes where I didn't win the entire box, but just like a couple packs. But the reason I'm making this video, besides the fact that it's gonna be really funny to look at how bad I was at deck building, is because when I got that regional top, I actually made this really short video. It was like 3 minutes long of my deck profile, and I said that I would talk about it more in a future video. So that's a deck list. It's kind of short. I will do much longer videos later on, but just want to get this out there. Now, that never happened, so I'm going back now, 3 years later, almost 4 years later, to talk about these card choices. At the time, I thought that this was the pinnacle of deck building. I've now realized that I was sadly mistaken. It was actually just not very good deck building at all. But it got in there. It got me a regional top 8. And, you know, there's a big difference between getting your first actual regional top and getting your first invite. I made a video about it a long time ago, but basically the reason that I don't count, or that most like halfway decent players don't count getting your invite as getting a top, besides the fact that getting your invite is really easy. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that hard to go X2 at a regional. Sometimes X2-1, sometimes X2 or X3. But when you thinking of like tops, the way that most people define tops, even if they don't realize it, is that when you go to a tournament and then you score high enough to get a physical prize. So when you get your invite, you don't get any physical prize. prize. You just get your invite to the World Championship qualifier, which is the simplest way for me to describe that it's not an actual top. But regardless, I'm sure there'll be people in the comment section that want to argue that point, or that haven't watched this far in the video and put that they got their first top at 17th place with some garbage deck. But anyway, here's the deck I used to top 8. So there's a lot of things that are funny about this. Specifically, there's 13 normal summons, because you have the Aratama, the Nikitama, the Izanami, the Thunder King, Yaksha, and 2 card D, which just seems really, really bad. Even counting that Nikitama is like sort of circumvents that because it gives you the extra normal summon. 13 normal summons is way too much. I believe that the card Ds were utter trash, which is kind of surprising because I ended up playing them at YCS Chicago, which is the actual good spirit list that we'll get to in a second. It's the YCS Chicago list. But this deck is just... My deck building at the time was just a lot of one-ofs. We see a random Dark Hole, we see a random Trap Stun, a random Bottomless Trap Hole. I mean, I guess those cards weren't garbage back then. They just weren't super useful, and especially like the 1 Trap Stun, like how is that going to help? Or like the 2 Forbidden Lances. And the meta at this time was quite different. It was mostly Geargia and Fire Fist. But you can see, like, even my side deck, like, none of these cards really make any sense. I mean, Black Horn of Heaven was, like, the only truly good card. Full House was good in theory against Fire Fist, but not really a lot of the times. And this deck in particular, because I didn't have any face-up cards that I could destroy besides Fiendish Chain. Skill Prisoner, card that I've talked about in a video, was like one of the bad cards I wanted to be good. I think this was the only list I ever played Skill Prisoner in. Didn't do anything. I think I tried decided it because I was still like on the hype train of, man, this card's gonna be really good. Well, it was terrible. 2 Maxi in the side deck isn't that crazy, just because like there weren't a lot of special summon heavy decks where you could really capitalize on Maxi. The 2 Mind Crush is a little weird. The 2 Kaiku's a little weird. The 1 random third effect failure is pretty weird. The Closed Forests are pretty weird. I'm trying to think what Closed Forest is for. Probably like Necro Valley or something. I don't know. But overall, you can just see this deck was really slow, really teched out. But it got in there. And the main reason it got in there is nothing to do with any of the cards in the deck besides Nikitama, Aratama, and Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning. None of the new Spirit decks can play this combo, but the main thing that I was trying to do back then is that if you can set up a Lavalval chain with a Nikitama underneath it, and then you have a Spirit monster on the board, which isn't like the craziest setup, you could detach the Nikitama to stack something Lavalval chain, usually BLS, and then the Nikitama will dissolve and you would immediately draw whatever you stacked. That was like the draw BLS combo. It was pretty cool. At the same regional, my friend Lucas Peterson also topped with a different build of spirits. Looking back, his build was definitely more advanced than mine was. Played Ghost Tricks so that I didn't have as many normal summons as mine did, and I had a lot more defensive cards. So that was cool for him, but at the time I thought mine was like strictly better because I had more strong monsters on the surface level because I had like Thunder King. Also, I really like Silver Sentinel back then. I thought it was like really cool to sort of cheese some wins. I think it resolved once and it won me the game, but obviously I cut it. So the funny thing with this deck, and probably the worst part about this deck, is that I do not have the best combo that spirits have in this top 8 build. In that combo, as we flip over to the YCS Chicago version of this list, the difference here is the Kage Tokage. So Kage Tokage is really important because anytime that you can open, and I know this is going to sound really specific and really bad for a 3-card combo, but back in the day, this opening basically ensured you won the game. And you had to open Aratama, Nikitama, and Kage Tokage. So what could you do with that hand? Well, you would summon the Nikitama, you would reveal the Kage Tokage, special summon it, normal summon the Aratama, add a second copy of Nikitama, overlay the Nikitama and the Kage Tokage for King of the Fair Limps, and then detach the Nikitama to add a second Kage Tokage to your hand and draw a card of the Nikitama. So basically, you ended with the same 3 cards. You still ended with an Aratama, Nikitama, and Kage Tokage for the next turn, but you also put a King of the Fair Limps on the board, and you also drew a card. Now, that might not seem too extreme, but it put a lot of pressure on your opponent. And even in this build, I wasn't playing 3 Kage Tokage, which was a mistake, and I wrote in this tournament report here that it was a mistake, mostly because the big reason that combo was so good was because if they didn't deal with the King of the Feral Imps, you then got to search a third copy of Kage to Kage, and then you could get 2 rank 4s because you had Nikitama, Aratama, and then 2 Kage to Kages. So that was pretty good. But at least it had that combo in there. It still had the Cardies, which I think were terrible. And I was playing, I mean, Trigodia wasn't like the worst thing ever. The cool thing with Trigodia is that if you had Trigodia, Aratama, you could block an attack with Trigodia next turn, summon Aratama, add Nikitama, steal level 4 monster with the Trigodia, and then draw a card off the Nikitama. So that was pretty cool. It still played like a lot of just random tech cards. I mean, you can see the trap lineup here is arguably worse because instead of just like a couple good 2-ofs and cards that are limited as 1-ofs, we were playing like 1 Memory of an Adversary, 1 Mere Force, 1 7 Tools of the Bandit, like all those cards that it's just like, I don't know if those were like, I eventually got past the point where I realized that just playing 1-ofs didn't make your deck like better. Like it's just better to have a more consistent deck. You can also see I'm still pretty heavily relying on the Spirit Engine here in terms of I was playing not only the 3 Aratama and 3 Nikitama, but also 2 Yaksha and 2 Izanami. Those cards just seemed really good to me back then. I realize now that probably the better build would have just been playing either just 1 Yaksha and 0 Izanami or 1 and 1. Those cards are good and they were good back then. They just obviously are just normal summons now, so that it's not very powerful. I also cut the Chaos Sorcerer because it didn't really do anything, although that probably was a mistake. The side deck is still like pretty much the same here. There's like a Dust Tornado for some reason. There's no Full House, I believe. Yeah, there's no Full House. That makes the difference because, like I said, there wasn't really anything to pop with the last version. I don't think I ever really resolved it. Blackhorn Heaven was really good against Geargia back then. 3 DNA Surgery. That's interesting. I'm trying to think what that was for. Probably like spellbooks, I suppose. Spellbooks were played at that event in some capacity. Actually, this deck, one of the best matchups for this deck was spellbooks because, so if your opponent ended with Fate, Tower, and Blue Boy, you could normal summon Nikitama and then enter battle phase. So then they were forced to Fate the Nikitama, or basically, but because you would attack over the Blue Boy, so if they didn't Fate it, they would lose the Blue Boy, so they couldn't activate Fate. So they always pretty much used the Fate on the Nikitama, and then in main phase 2, you would just summon the Yaksha with your extra normal summon to bounce Tower, and then they wouldn't get the Tower effects, so then they'd just be stuck with a random Blue Boy on the field. So it was actually pretty good at the time. I remember at that regional I played a spellbook player that I pretty much dominated just because of that play. But overall, I mean, the list hasn't changed that much. It's just like the Kage to Kage is huge because that would go on to be the pinnacle spirit combo enabler. And even at this event, I realized that I wasn't playing 3 and it was a mistake and that I should be playing 3. And then I took this deck to Tinley Park regional, and it was a lot of the same stuff, although eventually I did cut the card D, and that event had Fire and Ice Hand, and I played those cards, which was actually probably the best build of this because it had Fire and Ice Hands and had the least amount of non-Aratama Nikitama spirits, so it only had like 1 Yaksha, I believe, and maybe 1 Izanami, and it also played 3 Kage to Kage, which made it a lot better. That was pretty fun. But here is the deal. When you look at these older deck lists, a lot of times you've changed as a Yu-Gi-Oh player, and I know I personally have changed quite a bit. I used to play a lot of decks that played so many normal summons and played so many trap cards, which then makes sense why I like Brilliant Fusion so much is because one of the reasons I lost so often back in 2013 through 2015 is because I was playing just a ridiculous amount of normal summons. So when a card like Brilliant Fusion comes out, it lets me play Gem Knight Seraphonite, it lets me normal summon twice. And also, I don't really play decks with a lot of traps anymore, although that might be changing because I'm probably going to be playing Frog the Jam Paleozoics at a regional here in the coming weeks. But overall, I just play a lot more aggressive decks than I used to. I've kind of gotten away from the one-of mentality as far as tech cards. I just want decks to be consistent and powerful and have not a lot of normal summons. But spirits were important for me as a channel because they were really my first big boost in subscribers. I think for like a year, I had been getting like probably 10 subscribers a month, but in February or whatever, I had a huge boost where I got like 240 in 1 month, which isn't very good right now, for me, that would be like a terrible month if I only got 200 subscribers. But back then, that was like a really big deal to me. So I played Spirits for a while. I took them. Well, I didn't take them to the WCQ. It's probably one of my biggest regrets of all time in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not taking them to the WCQ, just because like I'd been playing them for so long. I think they had a pretty good matchup against the field there. But one of the things that I try to do now, at least when I go to events, is I try to make deck lists that I'll be proud of like a year or 2 years later. While these lists aren't terrible, I can't say that I made the best choices with them. I'd say in my past that the best decks I've played, like looking back on them, I really was happy with my Volcanic list at the 2015 WCQ. I thought that was really solid for Volcanics at least. And I also really liked my recent Dinosaur list at the 2017 WCQ, even though I didn't do very good with that deck. I thought that was a pretty solid list. I just kind of got unlucky there, which happens. But anyway, this is sort of my trip through memory lane. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, especially all of you that have been around since 2014 when I was doing all the Spirit stuff, which I know is a handful of you, not like the majority. But I just kind of wanted to go through these old lists, make fun of them a little bit, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Anyway, I'll see you guys later. Bye.